Welcome to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, the podcast where insights and innovation meet. Every episode, we dive into conversations with industry leaders, experts, and change makers, bringing you the stories and ideas in the renewable energy sector that shape our world. And now, let's jump into today's episode with your host, Wes Ashworth.
Welcome back to Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy. Today's guest is David Piperno, CFO of SparkCharge, a company reshaping how EVs get charged and also expanding what is possible with portable energy. SparkCharge built the world's first portable EV charging network and has expanded across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Now they're taking that same technology and applying it to something even bigger, supporting the grid. David brings more than 20 years of leadership across energy tech, transportation, and finance, including roles at Deloitte, Zipcar, and Spartan. Today, we're going to talk about portable charging, grid flexibility, and what it will take to accelerate clean energy adoption. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wes. Really great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. I'm definitely excited for this one. I think it's going to be a really, really good one and a lot of interesting things here. So before we dig into SparkCharge's technology, I want to just set the stage with your personal journey. So what first drew you into energy and technology, and what ultimately led you to SparkCharge?
Yeah, thanks, Wes. A big thing for me is, so my background has always been in technology and really mobility, right?
Yeah.
I spent most of my career at Deloitte doing M&A transaction services, but was really always looking to blend my own personal passion, right, with my career.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate. It's tough to do, right? Really tough to do. And I was really fortunate to be able to do that when I became CFO of Zipcar, right? So I've always believed in transportation, being sustainable. It's really one of the most influential systems in our lives, right? It touches the environment, touches equity, touches economic opportunity. But mobility really carries, one of the largest environmental footprints. And that kind of tension has been something that I've always been passionate about, making an impact in my career, right? I do finance, right? I was at Deloitte, right, doing finance. And how do I blend that with how my passion and how I feel, personally? And I was fortunate to do that. And when you think about SparkCharge, right, it's a solution that really solves both sides of that same equation. EV adoption is critical, but the charging infrastructure needed really was always behind, just lagging behind where EV adoption has been. And just really as a country, we haven't been able to build that infrastructure fast enough or really in the right places. And at SparkCharge, we just took a completely different approach. Instead of waiting for the grid to catch up, we started enhancing the grid, right? And delivering energy in unique ways. And that really aligns with my belief in sustainability. So just feel really fortunate to be able to do that. And I'm excited to be at SparkCharge. Been here for 4 years now.
It's awesome. Thanks for laying that out. And I love just your background across finance and mobility really it helps give context to how you approach this work. But I love the part of just aligning passion and your interests and what you wanted to do for sustainability in the world. And that's one thing that I love about this industry is any background you have, whether it's finance or communications or HR or IT or whatever it might be, you can do that and align that passion in clean energy, clean tech, and sustainability. So I love that a lot. As I mentioned in the intro, so you've also held senior roles at Zipcar and Spartan. What from those experiences shapes how you think about scaling SparkCharge now?
Yeah, I think that's great. Great question, Wes. I think at Zipcar, really the importance of designing these products and systems that are clean tech, right, but that can scale. Yeah. And I think a big thing about that is, focusing on the need of the consumer or the need of the business, but you also have to do it in an economic way, right? The unit economics have to be there. Otherwise, you're going to struggle to grow, right? If you have a solution that, hey, it's a great solution for the environment, but the business case and use case really aren't fitting well, you're going to struggle to grow, right? So I've always been a fan of really marrying those together, because when you do that, the product itself will just grow. And, it's a great way to kind of tackle the sustainability challenges, right? But also if the ROI, again, use case, business case is there, that works really well. So quite frankly, at Zipcar was a lot of figuring that out, right? Figuring the financials out, right? Figuring out, hey, which products really work well? Where can you make money, right? And where can consumers, where can businesses use this product, but also have a real world benefit in addition to, the sustainability aspect. So I'm passionate about that. I love that type of work, man. I love that type of work. That's what gets me up in the morning and gets me doing financial models, right? It's kind of figuring that stuff out.
Yeah.
And at Spartan, the big thing for us there was we went global, right? Spartan's in 40 countries.
Yeah.
So just really learn the ability of, how to operate across 40 countries, if you're domestic first and then really that global expansion. So we're starting to do that at SparkCharge, right? We're in 3 countries now, US, Canada, and Mexico, and we're looking to go international, right? Europe, we have a lot of demand in Europe, a lot of demand in the Middle East. And I think leveraging some of that background from Spartan will definitely, kind of help scale the company. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting for sure. And I think too, just the importance of the business side of the equation, the finance side of the equation, that yes, you want to make an impact, but ultimately how you make the biggest impact and how you scale and grow is through a lot of that skill and expertise that you bring to the equation. And so I love that. Love seeing as much as we can get of that in the industry and seeing those things happen and grow, like you said, globally and grow and scale and apply all those same principles. So let me ask you this. When you first joined SparkCharge, what was the biggest challenge that you saw, and maybe what made you confident that it could be addressed?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge, I would say, is, we were pretty early stage, right? When I joined, we had the technology, right? We had the initial proof points with customers, right? We knew that, hey, the technology worked, right? The customers wanted this technology, but we really needed to formalize how to operationalize the model and to scale, right? It's a lot easier to do it in a pilot, right? A lot easier to do it in an R&D kind of setting, where you can reiterate quick, get the product out, get the consumer feedback, and make sure it's all working. But it took a lot of time. I mean, we just started standardizing operations, right? Yeah. Building the systems, needed to be, to have for that consistent, reliable deployment of the systems. And, I think once we brought that structure to the model, the growth really followed. Yeah. We knew that the demand was there. And then we really started to see that growth to follow. And, I mentioned before, but I mean, it's, for us, I've been here for 4 years, right? 4 years ago, we were much further along than the proof of concept, but we were learning how to operationally deploy, right? And do that, repeatably. And, for us to be in 3 countries right now and, have coverage throughout the US is just a huge credit to the team at SparkCharge, right? They've really worked really hard. Obviously, as a CFO, you have a part in that, right? And you're kind of helping the team out do it. But the team's done an incredible job. There isn't a place where we can provide energy, right, in all 3 countries, which is a big deal for our customers, and customers come to us for that, right? Which is awesome to see.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love just the simplicity too of just standardizing and those kind of things. I'm sure there's a lot of like entrepreneurs listening and early stage founders and stuff, and a lot of times they do struggle with that piece of it. If you got this great idea, you got this great product or service, but then being able to really get things to where they're standardized, they're scalable, they're repeatable. So I'm sure, a lot of great insight, but I've seen that too. And bringing someone in like yourself, the power that gives your organization and allows you to really expand. So that's awesome. So SparkCharge as well. SparkCharge's portable model, it's a big shift from really in the whole charging conversation as a whole. Like, how did that idea evolve? And then how did customers just respond early on? Because usually they're maybe a little skeptical of something that it's different, right?
Yeah. 100%. And, I think quite frankly, it just evolved from an unmet need. You know, it's kind of one of those things that when you look back on, you say to yourself, hey, why didn't I think of this? Or why didn't I think of this earlier? Right. Because it was just a really obvious need, both on the consumer side, but particularly kind of the business side of how they're adopting electric vehicles. And it really all came out of like the time delays and the cost of installed infrastructure and the low utilization, right? The low utilization challenges that came along with it. And, Josh had this vision, right? He founded this in his dorm room. And he said, look, there's going to be these constrained grid issues, right? Not only in electric vehicles, but also other industries, right? Yeah. And we need a better solution. And so when you think about from a customer perspective around your question, right, around what are the challenges, like what were customers kind of skeptical of? And I think a big thing was really the ROI, right? Yeah. Like, their customer's initial reaction is, hey, I'm going to get a better ROI installing infrastructure, right? Because it's there. Not necessarily, a solution that's a little bit more costly for the infrastructure, these types of things that can happen, with the model. But, once we had some proof points, right, the service took off. And I think it's around how we structure the service, right? How we structure it as more of a pay-as-you-go model, eliminating upfront costs, upfront capital, those types of things. And I mean, look, when we have this this service out there that's, alleviating the capital constraints. So the question that we get is like, why would we even put infrastructure in at this point in time? Like we have SparkCharge, right? So that, the ROI is definitely there, and it's really accelerating the adoption, right, of electric vehicles for these companies.
Yeah, really cool. And I always love like the best companies come from solving a real problem and constraint and being that solution. I think it highlights how valuable flexibility can be, especially when infrastructure timelines are unpredictable and all the hurdles that we know that we have. And that flexibility kind of seems to be the thread that runs through SparkCharge's whole approach. And I want to explore that a bit. So just the model, your pay-as-you-go energy model removes that CapEx and long lead times, as you just shared a little bit about. Like, how does that work for a customer on day one? And maybe just through that, like a bit of overview and just how SparkCharge even works, maybe for those that are unfamiliar.
Yeah, no, thanks, Wes. So first and foremost, right, there's no upfront cost for a SparkCharge solution, right? We get fleets up and running, typically 1 to 2 weeks. Sometimes it can be literally the same day. Now that we have a much broader coverage, across these 3 countries, that deployment time is even quicker, right? Yeah. And it's incredible to see the impact. So, the impact that we have on customers when they need reliable charging. And we deliver quickly, right? So, we'll get a phone call and we'll say, look, I've got, 30 EVs showing up and been working through my infrastructure and it's 2-3 years out. The CapEx is super expensive for us to deploy. What can you do for us? And exactly right. Like the flexibility comes into play there where we deploy systems, right? It's a pay-as-you-go model where you're only paying for the service and the energy, that you're using. It scales up and scales down very efficiently, very quickly. If you need more energy, you can get more energy literally the next day. If you need less energy, that's totally fine. You're not paying for that either. And now that's a little bit of the glory of the model, right? I think when fleets are adopting electric vehicles, there's a lot of uncertainty in their minds, right? And they're saying to themselves, well, I've got this huge CapEx commitment. I've got this huge time delay to do this. And, we don't know utilization. There's a lot of unknowns about it, and this system, this model really takes away the concerns around those uncertainties, right? Where you're going to know your usage, right, with SparkCharge, and you're only going to pay for the usage that, that you're using as well. Again, with no commitments, no capital commitments, and pay as you go.
Yeah, it gives a really clear picture, a really straightforward setup that can make electrification feel far less intimidating for fleets. And you mentioned too, as you, I think just highlighted a bit ago as well, and we've talked about, but that you can deploy in a week, sometimes even faster. Like that speed is incredible to me. Like what enables that level of speed and a little bit more into how it all works.
Yeah, so we are either completely off grid, right? Or we're really leveraging the existing power at a location. So when you think about that, there's no need for, generally, right? There's no need for electrical work. There's no need for permits, installations, all of that, all of that type of stuff that takes time and money. And by the way, a lot of uncertainty around that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we can just use an empty lot, right? We can use a building that has some power and we can really get our systems in there, boost the power, and provide really fast, reliable charging infrastructure. And I think a big thing for us is, we used to kind of be in that 1 to 2 week time period, right, for deployments. Yeah. And now that our coverage range has really stretched across these 3 countries, sometimes we're there the same day, right? If not the next day, which is pretty incredible, right? It's pretty incredible. So we have that ability to do that, right? And I think, again, from a customer perspective, when we get a phone call and they tell us, hey, look, I have cars to charge. Like, when can you get there? And we, talk to the team internally and we say, hey, we can be there tomorrow, right? It's really, talk about delighting that customer, right? And that makes us happy at SparkCharge, right? We love to solve problems and we'd love to see those customers happy.
Yeah, it really is incredible. Obviously, when you reduce construction, permits, utility work, timeline changes completely. But I love just kind of like breaking the whole system. So many people try to just operate within the constraints of like normal, what everybody does. And instead of just, you thought of like a whole new way to do it all together with SparkCharge, which is really incredible. The timelines are amazing. Once customers see the system working, what mindset shift do you observe most often? Like what's some of the feedback and what's some of the realization that they have?
Yeah, I think I would say first is a little bit of skepticism, right? They're like, hey, can you really deploy that quickly, right? And then we do, and we deliver. So I'd say the first kind of thing that they start thinking is, hey, do I even need fixed infrastructure? Yeah. Right? Because of the flexibility, right, of our systems and the model, I think they start to think that, right? They start to say, hey, should I even continue with fixed infrastructure? And then, quite frankly, the second thing that usually comes is like, hey, we have more locations for you, right? So that's usually the
sure,
second.
which is great.
Once you validate it, right? Once you kind of take that little bit of skepticism away, if you can really move that quickly, they're looking for more sites, right? And a lot of our customers, I mean, we work with customers that are scaling, right? That are scaling electric vehicles. And we'll talk a little bit more about kind of energy, energy more broadly as well. But particularly on the electric vehicle side, we work with Fortune 100, Fortune 50 customers, right? That are really looking to scale their fleet. And really looking to go to different locations. I also think that what they the other mindset is really around kind of the cost benefits and ROI, right? They'll start to do the math and they'll say, "I've had SparkCharge here for a month. Obviously, the reliability is working really well, but also the cost of this, right, is a lot lower than I thought it was going to be, right?" And then when you start to kind of compare that up to doing the installs, right, and doing all the the trenching and tunneling and digging and everything that comes along with it, I think you start to realize that the flexible solution, right, is really effective, right, as you scale to meet, to really meet the energy needs. And again, the big thing is like you may need 100 cars charged one day, but then 200 cars charged the next day, right?
Yeah, sure.
And anytime you're solving that type of challenge with fixed infrastructure, right, you're always solving that challenge for like that peak, right? Hey, my peak is 1,000 cars charged in a day. And so you're always kind of like over your cost structure is kind of overcompensating, right, for those peak times. And with SparkCharge, we solve both of those, both the low and the peak, and you only pay for what you're using, right? And I think that's a big benefit that these customers see.
Without a doubt. And it goes back to that flexibility, right? It makes total sense. And I think for most people, like seeing something operational, once it's validated, then it really helps them imagine just new possibilities and like, where else can you do this?
Exactly.
Which is cool. So you've also shared that your delivered energy can be cheaper than the grid for customers. Tell us a bit about that and like what drives that outcome.
Yeah. So great question. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. And you think about like basically our systems are really energy storage systems, right? And they can recharge from anywhere, recharge from renewable sources, solar, wind, right? They can recharge from the grid, those types of things. And there's times when the grid needs help with frequency regulation, right? When there's kind of an overabundance of solar, right, or wind, we can take that energy, right, for a super low cost, right, store it, and then we can deploy that energy. And that's kind of it's a win-win, right? Because the grid itself, right, needs that, right? It needs that help with that excess supply coming in. And then also purely, pretty simple, just peak shaving, right? Where a system can just recharge, right, during non-peak times, deploy during the peak times, reduce that cost significantly. You always avoid demand charges with our systems, right? You're never kind of taxing the grid for that peak charge speed time with DC fast charging and getting charged for that demand charge, right? So, you kind of look at those three, and they're the three primary ways, but there's a couple other things that impact it as well.
It's a great explanation. And for me, like what's interesting about your model is how it moves naturally from vehicle charging into like broader grid services. And as you alluded to there, I want to dig into that a bit. So you are expanded into grid support and stability. What does that look like in real world deployments? And tell us a bit about that.
So a little bit hot off the presses, right? I think we're just kind of starting to publicly announce this, which is great. So we definitely appreciate the question. And look, I mean, our systems were really designed to support the grid, right? And we specifically, at least initially, designed them to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles, right? What it has done is it really led us to develop a product that supports a variety of different industries, right? And really supporting any industry that has power constraints in their operations, not just electric vehicles. And we kind of do this in two ways with our systems, right? Number one is like helping the overall grid with its energy demands by boosting the available energy at a location, right? And what I mean by that is, if you have any excess capacity at a location during any time, we could take that energy and store it, right? Store it in that battery for you. So you're always optimizing that amount of energy that location has. And then helping balance the demand, on the grid with our energy storage systems, right? Where I mentioned peak shaving, right? We can help balance the demand that way, with utilities. And overall, I mean, the utilities are looking at, how to deal with some of this demand, right? And they're looking at non-wire alternatives. And, our solutions really fit really, really well into that. And I think the big thing is like, we've been doing the same exact work with the systems but it's really been focused on accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles. But now we're seeing we see the power demands. Power demands across the US are just massive. And these systems do the exact same thing, right, for all of these industries, not just EV charging. So we're excited about that. We think it's a big growth area for us.
Yeah.
And we're starting to do some of that work now, and it's working really well. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I appreciate you breaking that down. It shows just how portable systems can play just more than one role. And I think when you look at that and the potential, that is really exciting. That could really be significant. And I think it's going to be needed. We can't just kind of go about it the same way we've always done it, that now we've got these demand increases. We've got these other things happening. We are evolving and changing as a society, and we need, creative, innovative solutions, which this certainly is. So it'll be really cool to watch that unfold and where it goes as well too, as you continue to grow. You've mentioned the peak shaving a couple times. I want to get into that. But for people new to the term, how does peak shaving really work in your system?
Yeah. So really straightforward example. So it's a battery, right? And we store energy during non-peak demand times. And then you can deploy those really at any time, right? But if you think of the classic example where, generally nighttime there's available energy, right? And from the grid. So we'll pull that energy from the grid, store it in that battery. And then during the peak times, right? During that same day or any other day, during any peak time, we can then deploy that energy. And that energy can be deployed, right, directly to the business, right, or consumer that's using that energy, or that energy can just be simply deployed back to the grid, right, during those peak times to help supplement the demand that the grid is experiencing at that point in time. And it does a lot, right? It helps really optimize pricing for energy, right? For our customers, number one. Again, I mentioned demand charges, helps them really avoid those demand charges, right? And even just kind of that peak pricing. And I think in the case of utilities, it really helps them manage their peak loads more effectively. And I think over time, as we expand this platform more, right, to other industries, I do think it's going to help them avoid some really costly infrastructure upgrades that they would have to do. There's they're time consuming, they're super costly, and these systems do exactly that, right? It's really a non-wire alternative for these utility companies.
Yeah, and clear explanation there. Obviously, managing peak periods is a concern for many operators, as we know. You talked about this a bit too, just the frequency regulation part. Maybe not everybody's familiar with that. I'm sure a lot of listeners are, but I'm sure there are tons that aren't. Tell us a bit about that, just, absorbing surplus energy, as you just expanded there too, and just how your technology really fits into that space.
Yeah. So, as renewable energy is generated, right? Yeah. There can be times where it's just generating excess capacity that the grid can't really handle, right? That's where storage comes into play, right? And, I think as, battery energy storage, right, just solves that problem, right? Yeah. Solves that problem. And I think as renewable energy continues to grow, particularly solar, right, the need for that energy storage is going to grow with it. And I think absorbing, that excess solar being produced really won't be a niche, right? It'll be something that's really significant and impactful for the grid. It'll ultimately just be essential, right, to the overall system and the grid and how we produce and distribute energy. And our systems, we do that now, right? Again, we do it now. Holistically, it gets deployed to EV charging, right? Holistically, but our systems are flexible, where they can provide that energy to wherever it needs to be to help support the grid. So I think quite frankly, I think the upside's huge because really, every percentage increase in renewable energies creates more volatility that storage has to balance, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so I think there's just going to be really continued growth there, and we're excited about that, right? We have some partners using our systems for that now, and I do think it's going to become a kind of core critical component to how we scale, clean energy here.
No, agreed. It really helps frame it up. I agree, and I want to hit on something else you mentioned. So just thinking about these opportunities of where you're expanding and other things, and I know this is such a hot topic, right? And these other energy-intensive operations like data centers being one. Everything we hear about is AI and data centers. And you hear about the demands and all that. Where do you see the main fit there? How does SparkCharge play into that space?
Great question. Yeah, we get that. We literally get that every single day. We're asking about data centers. So look, I think that data centers, where I see data centers today, right, is actually kind of similar to where EVs were when we initially launched SparkCharge, like 7 years ago, right? Except the energy is like much more massive, right? Like that energy demand is just exponential, which quite frankly just creates another huge opportunity, right, for how we service that massive demand here. And so like a big thing for us is quite frankly, like anytime you're kind of overtaxing the grid, right? That grid needs relief, right? So just our systems themselves, right, doing kind of this frequency regulation, doing this peak shaving, right, will fundamentally address some of the challenges, right, around data centers, right, by just, fundamentally doing that itself. I think we'll also directly serve data centers, right? Some projects, right, that'll be, pretty massive projects, right, that will, directly support data center growth as well. And then you think about really like the seasonality, right? There's always these seasonality challenges where, hey, you have heating issues, right? Summertime, they're actually more exacerbated, right, than wintertime. And you need these kind of peak solutions, right? You need to be able to store energy somewhere and get that energy deployed, right, for the peaking needs, right? Even daytime, nighttime. Daytime you're running the air conditioner, nighttime maybe you're not, right? So, anytime you have that type of, peak trough scenario, right, our systems can really solve that, really effectively.
Yeah, it's really helpful perspective. As we know, like a lot of sectors are dealing with growing power demand. Data centers becoming more and more prevalent and obviously using a lot more. So it's great these solutions exist. So in your view, how close are we to modular or mobile assets becoming part of just everyday grid operations?
Look, arguably we're there now, right? With what we're doing for SparkCharge. That kind of segment that most of our revenue generates from is EV charging, right? Right now, but that expansion is starting to happen. Look, I think it's a rollout, right? It's going to be a rollout, next year, in 2027, and we'll really continue to, go from there. I personally view it as it's just a vital part, right, of the solution. When you look at energy, how it's consumed, particularly in this country, and how we generate, these systems will quite frankly just be a vital part. And I think we saw that with EV charging, right? We saw that with SparkCharge and EV charging. And I think as we roll these solutions out to these other segments and industries, it'll just become a vital component to that as well. Because we've kind of proven out the ROI. Hey, you don't need to do these costly infrastructure builds, right? You don't have to do all this capital intensive work. There are other ways to do it. And I think we're going to see that in other industries as we expand there.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. The grid is clearly in a period of transition. Options like these give operators more breathing room, and you can obviously just see the impact that you can have there. So let's shift to just larger picture a bit. So you've raised some important concerns. We had a previous conversation around just competitiveness, and you've said the United States has just fallen behind, some countries like China, when we talk about EVs, solar, grid innovation. What factors for you are just contributing to that gap?
Yeah, so great question. Look, I think a big thing, quite frankly, is a little bit of a flux in policy for us, right? Yeah. I think the IRA was really, and that's the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Was really, scripted out to be like one of our best chances to catch up to China, from a clean energy perspective, from an electric vehicle perspective. And when I think about, that landscape, electric vehicles, right, in China aren't just the vehicle. It's the technology, it's autonomous vehicles, right? It's the grid, it's clean energy. And kind of the incentives have been there, right, to build that infrastructure that way. I do think with kind of the IRA, right, I think that was a really great catalyst, right, to move us in that direction. And, I think we are continuing to move in that direction. It's just a little bit about like the pace that we're moving in that direction that is actually more of a cause of concern for me. Because we're clearly behind, right? Like no one debates that we're behind China, right? From technology perspective and clean energy, electric vehicles and that overall technology. And they own the supply chain, right? And that's a challenge for us. We're kind of working here in the US to get that supply chain built up, but it's going to take some time, right? It's going to take some time. Quite frankly, I think it's going to take some time and some incentives to continue to push that along, right? So that's my own personal view.
No, helpful context. And pointing out that issue, just sort of the pace of adoption. Why does pace matter so much?
Yeah, I think it's really about us being left behind. Yeah. Right. When I think about, electric vehicles and the adoption of them, I think we're kind of hitting a little bit of a normal consumer adoption challenge, right? Like consumers are getting used to these things, right?
Yeah.
Hybrid vehicles are becoming a little bit more popular. There's still kind of this range anxiety that's out there. And a lot of what we're doing is addressing that, right? It's addressing it. It should, again, my view is like, it's just not addressing it as fast as we should address it. And the reason why I'm a proponent of that is, I just look at, we've been a leader, right, in this country. Yeah. We've been a leader in vehicles, right, leader in energy. And, I think we should continue that leadership position, right, as a country. I mean, there's cars, right, cars that are produced in China are $15,000, $20,000 electric vehicles, right? And they're amazing cars, cars. We're just getting to the point, right, where these electric vehicles are really decreasing in price. You can get a great EV for, $35,000, $40,000 right now. Yeah. And that excludes any incentives, right? Excludes any incentives. These domestic OEMs like Ford is really targeting, a great pickup, a literally mid-range, awesome pickup truck that's electric. That's, going to be a price point of $25,000. So we're getting there. But I, quite frankly, for those reasons, kind of want to see it, happen a little bit faster. Yeah.
As we talked about before too, maybe we just need a bit of a kickstart, to kind of help speed that up. But for you, like, what would that look like in practice if we were to get some sort of kickstart?
Yeah. I think that, quite frankly, the kickstart it's a little bit incentive based, right? Yeah. I think, China's had that, right? And that's why they're in the position that they're in. So I think, really sticking to some of these incentives that we have and pushing them forward. I mean, I think a great sign was actually NEVI, right? NEVI was, the incentives that were deployed under the Inflation Reduction Act to build these corridors for electric vehicle charging. And that's kind of taken the biggest constraint away from consumers, right? Which is in fact, that range anxiety. And that's going through, right? So not only is it going through, so it's $15 billion that's getting deployed to the states to build this infrastructure. But a really good sign is they took away a lot of the red tape that was slowing that down, right? So that's now able to get deployed faster. And even good news, which we love because we're proponents of battery energy storage, is battery energy storage systems now qualify for NEVI as well. Yeah, which is great. So I think it's just going to happen a lot quicker, and I think that's a big kickstart. But also just really sticking with some of these manufacturing credits that we have. There's a bunch of tax credits that, that are kind of rolled in the system that are still available, right? They're still all available, for companies to use. And I think just companies taking advantage of it and continuing the march forward.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And it's good to see that kickstart happening. I want to bring the conversation a little bit back to just consumers and fleets because, they're the ones living in this shift in real time. So we've talked about it. You've said EVs are just simply better cars, and I would agree. But what do you think people misunderstand most about EVs as a whole?
Look, I think first and foremost, I think they've got this range anxiety. Yeah. Right. Like that's kind of and I get it, right? Makes sense, right? You're kind of used to your gas vehicle, the gas stations, where you can fill up. But quite frankly, I think when you that's the big benefit over electric vehicles, right? For electric vehicles over ICE vehicles. Is if you can charge at home, right? Yeah. You really you're really rarely ever using public infrastructure. Correct. And if you think about that, if you have 300 miles of range and you're charging at home, you're never going to a gas station, right? Period. Take that equation out, right? You're never stopping at a gas station before work or after work or to a friend's house because if your car's been home, you've got 300 miles of range. Yeah. And the only time you really need to use public infrastructure is when you are traveling that far. Exactly. And the way that I think about it, I don't personally travel that far, on a regular basis, right? Maybe 3, maybe 4 times a year, right? Like I'm traveling that much where I have to find public infrastructure to charge. Yeah. And so for me, like what I found with like owning an electric vehicle is that trade-off was like actually a phenomenal trade-off for me, right? Like I was actually stopping at a public infrastructure 3-4 times a year rather than 3-4 maybe twice a month, right? So 24 times a year or plus. So that, that experience, and I think you got to feel that, right? You have to like try an EV, you got to feel that and understand that it's actually a net benefit, a major net benefit kind of on the trade-off. And then look, like I think an under kind of publicized thing about electric vehicles is you get pushed updates, right? Like every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you get pushed updates. And these updates is, sometimes it's like you're getting the new model year of the car, right? Like, so you're getting like this incredible update that is, giving you new functions and, features in this vehicle that you'd have to buy, a whole new vehicle to get those, get those updates. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's like experiencing it. And I do think, the hybrid solution for these vehicles is a good step in that direction. Yeah. For consumers to kind of begin to feel it, begin to understand it. And then I think it will kind of naturally take that next step to more, full battery electric vehicles.
Yeah, no, all good points. And I think a lot of people form opinions, obviously, before they ever drive one. And it's funny as you say that, you're like, well, most people, especially if they're like a big SUV driver, truck driver, they're filling up maybe once a week. And then you're like, okay, how long does that take you? And I know like you've been there where you're driving home from work and the last thing you want to do is have to stop and fill up. EV, you don't have to do that. You just go home, plug it in, you're good to go.
Exactly.
So, it's in a lot of ways, it's like, it's not just better for the environment, whatever, it's a better, superior product, in my opinion, kind of the equivalent to me of like a landline versus a cell phone. And like gas, sometimes it's a little bit like, it's a little outdated, it's getting older. EVs, like they're super fun to drive as well too. And, obviously those concerns you raise have been resolved. Just try it out.
Just try it. Just give it a try. I think people are going to love them.
Exactly. Yeah. You're right though, like range anxiety, like number one, probably concern that always comes up first. How do you maybe see that concern changing as infrastructure expands and portable charging grows?
Yeah, I think, I think that the big thing there, quite frankly, is the charging infrastructure for these corridors, right? Yeah. So when you're traveling, if I'm traveling 100 miles, 200 miles, can I get a charge? I think that's people's biggest concern. The biggest concern isn't necessarily, hey, I'm, going to a friend's house or, going to work. Can I get range? Because that's you're holistically charging at home, right? For the most part, right? For the most part here. And I think the good news there is like NEVI's moving forward, and it's moving forward at a faster rate than it was before, which is phenomenal. Again, it's $15 billion, right, to install this infrastructure up and down the corridors, that where people travel, and it's getting distributed. We see it getting distributed, faster than it was before. And I think we're going to see like the range anxiety kind of continue to fade and maybe accelerate, with that infrastructure. And I think that's important, right? And having that reliable infrastructure when you're traveling is definitely an important, component of it all. We do some of that at SparkCharge, right? Where we're providing, that infrastructure along these, travel routes, those types of things. And we're doing it really, and it's driving like intelligence, right? It's telling, states, where should we actually install chargers? Like, where should we spend the money and install infrastructure? Those types of things. So I think, we're kind of on the cusp there. I do. I think back to my Zipcar days, man. Yeah. This is like 14 years ago, something like that, where we had EVs in the fleet, and we heard the same thing, range anxiety. And, what I would say there is kind of my experience is it takes that consumer some time. Right? And they have to use it, and then it takes them a couple months, takes them a year, and then they really understand that, hey, I don't really need to be concerned about this. And then I think you couple that kind of consumer shift, right, with NEVI, and we should start to see that alleviate.
Yeah, absolutely. Great observation. And I agree. Familiarity usually reduces worries. I think that'll only get better and better as we go. Another thing too, so you've described ICE vehicles or internal combustion engine vehicles as inflationary and EVs as deflationary. How should listeners think about that difference, or help break that down for us a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, look, I think anyone going to buy a car, right, is seeing that the price for an ICE vehicle is just going up. So if you bought a car, 4 or 5 years ago, you go back, look at the same car, it's more expensive. And there's a variety of reasons around that, right? Just kind of overall, inflationary factors, right? Going into the parts of vehicles, those types of things. But I mean, look, like maintenance costs too, right? Yeah. There's more maintenance costs on an ICE vehicle rather than an electric vehicle, and those costs are trended up. There's also, really fuel prices, right? Generally over time, fuel prices have increased, and energy prices as they are just generally more stable, right? There's a little bit less inflation across the board for energy rather than the fuel. And we're seeing, cost of EVs come down significantly, right? Even without these tax credits, these incentives that are kind of been embedded in them. I mentioned before, right? Ford's on the path here to produce a great, electric pickup, right? That's a great truck, $25,000 price point, right? And I think also if you looked 7-8 years ago, EVs were a little bit for the luxury, right? You had to pay a premium for that car, and you can get an incredible EV now for $40,000 brand new, and that's actually generally cheaper than most ICE vehicles as they are now. Right. Yeah. To go out and buy a new car, you're most likely spending more than that. So I think just overall, right, these the cost of these electric vehicles, right, are coming down. The maintenance is a lot cheaper. You're not dealing with lot of moving components. You're not doing oil changes. You have far fewer parts in an EV that can even break too. And so your total cost of ownership, right, will definitely be cheaper. And then with the supply chain, with batteries particularly coming down so much over the past couple of years,
right?
You were paying $200, $300 a kilowatt hour for a battery, right?
Yeah.
And now batteries are sub 100 kilowatt hours,
sure.
right? So, sub $100 per kilowatt hour. So that's just going to keep bringing that price down, and that's going to keep getting better, right? I haven't seen a forecast where folks have said like, hey, these costs are going to increase, right?
Yeah.
And so we should be, the realization of, a $25,000 electric vehicle in the U.S., made in the U.S., right, over the next couple of years, 2026, 2027, really should come to fruition. And that vehicle, I would expect, right, if I'm a consumer, you can expect that vehicle to be better, right, than a $40,000 ICE vehicle, right?
Yeah.
So I would say keep your eyes out there for it, because I'm pretty confident it's going to happen.
Without a doubt. Helpful breakdown just overall there. I love that the focus on just total cost of ownership obviously matters so much to consumers and fleets. With your focus today, like heavily on fleets, how do individual consumers fit into maybe your long-term view or long-term plan?
Yeah, great question. So we do a little bit of that work now for electric vehicles, but mainly fleets for the electric vehicles. But I see like our systems, kind of talking about the broader application of our systems, right? I see them playing a more critical role in how we're continuing to help balance the energy demands for consumers. Right. So that can relate to how they're charging their electric vehicles, right? Their energy demands, how to charge their electric vehicles, but also just our systems enabling their overall cost of energy to come down. So I see it kind of, both ways for sure. We're starting to do some of that now, but I would anticipate that, that our systems are just, used more broadly, right, across that grid. And then consumers will ultimately see the benefit, right, where anytime there's costly infrastructure that needs to be made by utility companies, that's just going to increase the cost of energy, right? So the more and more that we can help not only delay, but actually permanently replace these expensive infrastructures, consumers are going to see the benefit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it makes complete sense. And as we get a little closer to time, I want to finish towards just looking forward. And because, SparkCharge is clearly building towards something larger, and very excited about the future and what that's going to look like. But looking ahead for you, like 3 to 5 years, what's the biggest opportunity for SparkCharge, and what does it look like down the road?
Look, I think we're, obviously like our business around electric vehicles is proven and very, kind of maturing right at this point in time, where people know us and we do a great job at what we do in alleviating kind of these great constraints for electric vehicles. But we're now starting to deploy, these units, right, in our technology to support not only EVs, but other industries that are really power constrained, similar to just what we've seen with electric vehicles. It's going to be a big focus for us, right? I think, SparkCharge is really, we're really a mobile energy company, where we're deploying that energy where it needs to go, right? Where's that cost per kilowatt hour the greatest, and how can SparkCharge help alleviate, that cost? And also kind of, hey, where are these costly infrastructures needed and planned? And how can we, alleviate that need to do to these costly infrastructure build outs. And we do it faster, right? So it just really takes, something that may take 10, 15 years, right? In those instances down to, maybe a couple months, right? To get things deployed and get it out there. And then I also think about international, right? We're definitely focused on Canada, US, Mexico right now. But we're getting a lot of demand, right? In Europe and the Middle East. Yeah. So there are two regions of the world that I would see us entering into kind of rather quickly, right? Yeah. And then just really leveraging some of the background that we have, like myself included, but the rest of the team, and tackling some of these international markets.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff. And it just, shows how wide the field of possibility is for mobile power. So again, excited to see where that goes. So when you look at just the future of clean energy and mobility, what gives you the most hope?
The most hope. Yeah. So look, as I mentioned kind of earlier in the conversation, kind of having the finance background and the passion around sustainability, right? My big thing is it all comes down to ROI, right? Yeah. That's just super important. It's got to work. It's got to work for consumers. It's got to work for businesses. And I think over time, we've been able to prove that out, right? We've really proven out hey, clean technology solutions, they satisfy the demand. At an ROI that that's compelling, and that works. That works for us. So like that always, right, keeps me going, right? Knowing that we've done it before, and that trajectory is always on the right trajectory, right? Sometimes it doesn't happen like as fast as I would like it, right? But over time, we've innovated, right? We're strong innovators, and we've innovated, we've developed technologies, and I love being part of that, right? And I love just continuing to see that happen. I mean, the leaps and bounds that we've made, right, over the past, 4 or 5 years, I'm super excited about like the next leaps and bounds, right? That'll be made. And then look, particularly with AI, right? I mean, imagine the impact that we can have with more technology advancements in this space by applying AI. And so we're starting to do that here at SparkCharge as well, right? We actually had a press release go out about that. And that's an exciting platform, right? Where, that platform is kind of part and parcel to the core product, and how energy gets delivered to, to the locations that need it most, and identifying these grid constraints and solving these grid constraints. So I'm super excited about it. I think we've got a history, in this country of being super innovative around this space and proving the ROI, and I'm excited for it.
I love that. A lot to be hopeful for there. Very, very exciting. Final question, just anything you didn't get to share, anything you want to leave the audience with, anything we kind of left out. Final word is yours, and I'll just open it up and let you share anything else you want to leave the audience with.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. I think we covered a lot, right? But the only other thing I would actually kind of add on to a little bit what I was saying is around AI, right? Yeah. It's a little bit of a new offering that we're providing right now for SparkCharge. And what that offering does right now for fleets is it really continues to take their lead time down for EV installations, EV infrastructure and charging. So something that would, take analyses around, hey, their energy needs or demand, we've taken from, months, right, of work down to literally minutes to an hour through these AI platforms that we've built. So that's super exciting. So not only that, like what that helps us at SparkCharge is like deploy even faster. Yeah. And not only faster, but even more accurate, right, with the deployment. So we're servicing our customers in a way that's, not over-indexing on the amount of energy they need, and not undersupplying the energy that they need, and doing it even faster than we've done historically. We're super excited about that. And that's now a core offering, right, that's available, that we've been actively deploying. And then I think that platform goes right into other industries as well, right? Yeah. Because I think, what we've done at SparkCharge is, solve these challenges more specific to electric vehicles, but it applies to all these other different industries. I think throughout 2026, we're going to do a lot of work, and we're excited about it.
That's awesome. I love that, David. Just great conversation. Great way to close there. You really gave us a clear look at how SparkCharge is supporting EV adoption, helping relieve pressure on the grid. You also laid out larger challenges and opportunities facing the energy transition today. So I appreciate you taking the time and sharing so openly. For everyone listening out there, visit sparkcharge.io. I'll link that in the show notes as well to learn more about their work. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and share Green Giants so more people can hear these stories. And with that, we will see you next time.
This episode of Green Giants, Titans of Renewable Energy, was brought to you by Lee Group Search. If you enjoyed today's discussion and are looking to recruit top talent for your company, or find your next career opportunity in the renewable energy sector, visit leegroupsearch.com. Let's continue driving the future of clean energy together. Until next time, keep pushing toward a greener future.